I normally get a thumbs up from there.
Yep.
Okay, so we're now online. So welcome to today's Finance Committee. I'm going to start with the minutes of the meeting of the 6th of September. I'll move those as being correct.
Formally second, Chairman.
Thank you. And if everyone is happy with those, I'll move on to any apologies for absence. And it looks as though everybody is here. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yep, but no apologies, Chair.
Thank you. So any declarations of interest by members or officers? And I'm not... Tom.
So to declare, obviously, all members are users of the IT. Obviously, we've received equipment, and it might be worth just maybe
We'll all leave for
pointing
that
that
item,
out. Yeah, just that we all obviously received the equipment.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. So I'll go on to item 4, which is the financial monitoring report for period 5. I'll formally move the recommendation.
Formally second, Chairman.
Thank you, Roger. And I'll ask Nigel if there's anything to say in addition to the report. Nigel.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be brief. On table 1 on page 8 of the pack shows that the forecast for the year is very similar to the previous forecast reported at the last meeting. There's some slight changes within each committee, though, within that. In terms, you'll see that the additional income in transport and environment means that there will be an underspend. The additional overspend in children and young people, some of that is to do with timing, in terms of they've identified additional requirements, the MASH, and took a report to committee in September. But this report obviously is period 5, so we won't do the contingency allocation until the next period. Once that allocation has been done, it will bring that overspend back down to what it was reported in period 4. There's been some allocations from contingency, which are set out in paragraph 23 and 22. Moving on to the balance sheet, onto the capital items, the forecast outturn is 1.6 million. And again, some of those variations are set out in the report, so I won't repeat those. And it's got the usual report on the Treasury management activities. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. Any questions, any comments on the report? Yeah, Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. Just having a look on page 17, paragraph 47 of the report identifies a need to borrow approximately 70 million over the course of the year to A, fund the capital programme, B, replenish internal balances, and C, replace maturing debt. This will push this authority's debt to approaching 600 million. The only reason people aren't talking about Nottinghamshire County Council drowning in debt is probably because of the debt of Nottingham City Council and things like the debacle of Robin Hood Energy. Does the chairman agree with me that this council needs to get a grip over our growing debts, especially the growing Public Works Loan Board debt? Should we be cutting our cloth accordingly and looking at marginalising or minimising prudential borrowings? I refer explicitly to the investment in the Nottinghamshire scheme that is currently on hold. We're not apologising for continually raising the council's plans to borrow £28 million, including £14.3 million for the new council offices at Topwigay Farm in Hucknall that we don't need because of hybrid working strategies. Would the chairman agree that pursuing this is a financial folly?
I think you'll be well aware that investing in Nottinghamshire is under review, and I think that review will soon be working its conclusion, and we'll be able to talk about exactly what investing in Nottinghamshire will look like going forward. Nigel, do you want to make any comment on the debt?
Thank you, Chairman. To service that debt, which is the issue in terms of how it affects council tax, it's about 10% of our budget is servicing the debts. And you're quite right, Councillor Waters, it's something that we have to keep an eye on. And we do that when we set the prudential indicators at the beginning of the year, and as long as we stay within those indicators. But it is something that's on my mind, and now also members' minds in terms of what can we do to make sure that we do not get excess in terms of how much it costs us to service that debt. So you're right to raise it, and we are minded about that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tom, did you indicate you did? Yeah, and then Jim.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Nigel, for those answers. But just my concerns are twofold. Just want to ask questions about the gathered access road and also the children and young people issues. So starting with the gathered access road, it's clear to me that there is, well, Lee used the word debacle, I use the word debacle going on here. I mean, £5.4 million overspend is a concern, particularly when you put it in the context of like deteriorating roads in Huthwaite, Carsick, Blythe, Renneth, whatever. We've got the improvement money. I'd like to know very clearly, how is this overspend going to be financed? Is it coming out of the repairs budget? Or are we going to be seeing extra money coming out of reserves directly from other council budgets? That's one question there. And then the next question really relates to the children and young people's. Members will be aware that we spoke about this at the last couple of meetings now. I understand it's on the next agenda for the next meeting, but there's some information in this financial report that shows that what we were worried about is now starting to happen. And we spoke about it a lot, but seemingly nothing seems to be happening. And I hope we're going to get more than just a few questions fired at the next meeting. And then also you start to look at Minster School, Minster House, 1.3 overspend identified in these documents. When's the situation going to be resolved? It's still not being used, but we're still spending a lot of money on it. And I'd like to know really when's it going to be resolved, very simply. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, both the items that you've raised, Tom, are on the next agenda, and we will make sure that's a meaningful report on both of those. There's a lot of work going on, both to get in control of the children's budget and to fully understand the Gedling Access Road overspends. And a lot of it, as we said last time, is due to COVID, and there is a global problem in construction and large civil engineering projects caused by the COVID crisis, but that's not to excuse it. All of that will be in a report, in two separate reports that come to us at the next meeting.
Very clear. Yeah, I tried to ask clear questions just to get clear answers. I mean, where is this money coming from the Gedling Access Road? Because there's multiple partners involved. Why are we shouldering the burden of the overspend solely of the county council? And if it is coming from the county council solely, which it seemingly is it coming out of the repairs budget, or is it coming out of reserves, etc.? And then where's the money coming from?
Yeah, it's not coming from the roads budget. It's not coming from the highways budget directly. We are responsible for all of the overspend because it's our project. And as I say, we will bring a full report to the next meeting, which will make all of those questions clear to you. And we'll make sure you get that in good time, Tom, as all opposition groups will. And if there's any detail that's missing from that report that you'd like to see, we'll try and get that resolved rather than asking it at the meeting. If there's anything extra you'd want in advance, let's make sure that we get it on and we can deal with it all at the next meeting. Councillor Kramer, Jim.
Yeah, thank you. Going back to, pardon me, just a couple of questions and one comment. But on item page 9, 68, 14 again, going back to 1.3 million overspend, it does say specifically temporarily closed. The forecast for full outcome after a specific piece of work. Has this specific piece of work actually happened, and what's the guidelines for this actually specific piece of work? Do we have a timetable when it will actually be hopefully completed by? But again, has it actually started? It doesn't say whether the work has started or not, or who's actually doing it. And then going on to another question on the Treasury Management, item 44 on page 16. Just a general question on that, whether we're actually the council's pooled bank accounts. Just for information, how many pooled bank accounts do we actually have? Because I wouldn't mind one in my back pocket, perhaps, but for certain works. So yeah, so do we have many pooled? And it's just a very general statement there. It might be 2, it might be 102. So it would be nice just to know for that one. On the actual recommendations as well, just due to the timing of what's happening at the moment nationally, would it be worth adding to that? And I've put it down specifically, writing someplace, that we actually try and include the energy costs as well to that, because as a future predictor, it's going to be actually crucial at this moment in time. Everything's affected by it. our current pricing, storage, etc., etc. So for the monitoring report, are we actually going to start looking now at how the onward effect of actually energy cost is going to be, because it's going to be quite substantial. And again, as a general one, and it may be for the next report, but are we going to have a report of any suggestions or plans we may have had for a 5% increase in the rates, which is apparently for 3 years. It's been looked at the moment nationally that going up by 5%. So will there be a report on that in the very near future? Thank you.
There will be the budget report and the cycle of budget reports as ever. I think the 5% figure is a bit of speculation at the moment, and we're waiting on the full details of the local government settlement, which we're assured is going to be with us earlier this year. I don't believe that for a minute. So as soon as we do know, we'll have something more concrete to tell you about. I think it would be useful with the growing issue with energy costs to have some sort of report, whether it's part of this monitoring report, Nigel, or a separate report to a future committee. I know we purchase energy in advance, so perhaps you could tell us a little bit about that to reassure members. Jim, your other question was specifically on Minster View, and I have to say I'm not entirely aware of the detail of that piece of work that's in paragraph 14, but unless Nigel has it at his fingertips, we'll get you that information. And on the subject of how many bank accounts and pooled bank accounts, I'm sure Nigel's got all that detail to hand.
Yeah, I've run out of fingers in terms of trying to work out all the bank accounts. Yeah, in terms of the cash management one, to be honest with you, I don't know. There are many because we pool them schools separately, and you have to remember there's 177 schools. They're pooled separately because we want to make sure they got interest of them directly to the schools. But even if we stood here and said, well, even if I was a normal business, we have a payroll one, a general ledger, a creditors one, there are a lot of bank accounts. So there'll be at least 20, I would have thought, and I'm sure people back will say there's an awful lot more than that. I'll get you the number, Jim, in terms of how many pooled we have. The benefit, of course, is because it's one bank. It's Barclays. So the benefit of that is any one that's slightly overdrawn will be netted off by the other balances that are held there. And we manage them across the whole of the raft of balances that we hold. And that will also include petty cash accounts. And that's therefore why the number is going to be a lot greater than I could imagine. So that's why I'll find out about those. On the energy costs, yeah, I'm happy to see what we can do in terms of bringing a report back in terms of specifically in terms of how they manage the energy costs. I'm sure colleagues probably already do that for another committee in terms of Environment Committee in terms of how that's done. So I want to make sure that it goes to the right committee in terms of the responsibility for managing that. So I'll check if they already do something for the Environment Committee or had something planned. I do know, though, that the way that we do the forward purchase, some of those may be 30 months in advance in terms of the way they buy those units, which obviously negates the impact a lot in terms of what's happening around energy. And you also have to remember that the council has made a significant investment in terms of LEDs and other environment measures to try and reduce the amount that we use in terms of electricity specifically. So that will also have an impact on that. So I'll go back and ask colleagues in terms of what we can do. And on the specific piece of work in terms of children's, I asked the same question, to be honest, Jim, in terms of what that specific piece of work. It's a delicate piece of work because of the nature of the business that Minster View was providing in terms of respite care for children. So it's not a simple decision of make or stop or buy. I'll go back to children's and find out what that is. Hopefully that will come back to the next committee. So it's a specific question that I know that Councillor Hollis will have on his mind in terms of that. So I'll ask them to also update in that report what they mean by that specific piece of work around Minster View.
Yeah, do you want to come back to
come back on that very quickly? Yeah, thanks for that. I understand it's actually going to be a very delicate piece of work, but interesting as well. Literally, I mean, as it actually started, I mean, that sort of thing rather than, yeah. Don't want to know the details, just or a guesstimate of when it may or may not finish.
Yeah, the piece of work has started. I know that has. It's just that what it will mean is the decisions need to be made from the conclusion that it reaches. So I'm not quite sure how far that has reached to that point.
Okay, thank you. Mike, next.
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks for the report, Nigel. Just following on from colleagues, 600 million at 10% is something that we need to be aware of, as I know you are, and you've kept us fully up to date. But again, it is a concern, especially in today's climate. On to CYP, I see that we put monies in to CYP through COVID to support the overspend there. How do we determine the difference of support compared to delivery of service, and separate still, without that COVID support, we will be struggling to actually provide the service?
If I may, it's very difficult to do that cut-off point between what is COVID and what is non-COVID related. And also, to be honest, Councillor Pringle, it's also a difficulty in terms of when does the implications of COVID, when that's likely to end, because of the significant implication it is to families and to family breakdowns and stuff like that. So what I can say is that part of the budget setting process that the chairman is related to, we're looking at all those factors in terms of what the long-term implications are to the medium-term financial strategy, and particularly next year, taking into account all of those factors, particularly COVID and the implications on children's services.
Okay. Bruce.
Yeah, just a comment really. Listen to what Councillor Waters got to say. I know he's new in post, but with reference to the debt levels as far as this council is concerned. Much of the debt is accrued by this council. For example, over the last 4 years, we spent £100 million renovating schools. So we could be in a position where we don't accrue the debt, but we're asking our children to go to schools which are not fit for purpose, affecting their education. Much of the money has been spent on provision of youth services. We could not spend that money and leave our youth without any service delivery. Much of the money is spent on supported accommodation and therefore is there to support elderly people and providing them with support. Much of the money is we've built new schools dealing with children with complex needs. We could not spend that money and leave those people without any particular service. So you need to put the capital spend and the capital debt, as far as this council is concerned, in the round with our responsibility to provide a service for the people of Nottinghamshire. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Bruce. John.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Back to Tom, and he's asking about the 5.4 million for the guard. Correct to ask that and where it's coming from. In a report we're going to get, and it's going to be, is it next month when it comes back? Could we have some comparisons in there, to level this up? Because I know it sounds a lot of money, 5.4, but if you compare it with HS2 and other things like that, but it's certainly something we need to concentrate our minds on. And also I'd be interested in what the cushioning effect we put into, for extra expenditure, etc. We need to know what that is and if there's any lessons we can learn from it, because looking at it, I know I've got an interest because it's near me, but the actual, building of the thing and all those types of work have been extremely challenging. And I think they've done well at the moment. With the 5, it's correct, it's public money. We want to know where that 5.4 million is coming from. But I would like to, set a more level playing field and say, well, this I know in our, some buildings that we're doing, it's gone up astronomically. And that's really because of supply and demand, and we're not being able to get the materials. So, so it's a really fair report. We can look at it. Thank you.
And we shouldn't forget, John, as well as anybody, better than most, the enormous benefit that the road's bringing. It's been on the stocks for about 50 years in terms of getting it off the ground and getting it actually built.
Similar to that down there, the A453, it's brilliant. Yeah,
unlocks huge amounts of development potential in Gedling, doesn't it? Tom, you wanted to come back briefly?
Yeah, just briefly, just to round off some of the comments. I 100% agree with Councillor Clark. Some comparisons would be useful. I think probably my concern is probably selfishly from an independent group perspective. Obviously, the money's not going to be spent in our areas. We want to know, is it going to impact other areas? Councillor Lawton's comments, while I recognise him, I'd encourage him to look at some of that funding, is government funding that he touches on, like the schools and the support of children. So although some of his facts were correct, some of them were slightly spun, but we'll let that get away with it. But my main comment is the children and young people's. I think by the sounds of it, the Labour group and the Independents and the Conservatives are in agreement that we need to look at it. I suppose just to be clear where my frustrations come in, we need to stop just talking about it and do something. While it's good that they come in, at the moment, the spend in children and young people's is up here. We were putting in down here. The COVID grants topped us up. They've now gone, but the spend's still up here. And mark my words, Chairman, the children and young people's chairman will be coming to you and saying, we need more money. I'd argue, say that these services are extremely important and we need to make sure they carry on. But sometimes just chucking money at things isn't the answer. We want to understand what are the problems, like Councillor Creamer says, at Minster House, and what are the problems in other parts of the department. And my encouragement to you would be, is let's not just have one meeting next month or whenever it is. I think there should be an item on every committee agenda about children and young people's, because it's not just a children and young people's issue anymore. That money, we've got the same pot of money across the county, and the overspend will start spilling into other departments. We've got to take off 10% off highways because children and young people's need it. We've got to take it off communities because children and young people's need it. That's the situation we're going to be in. And we know Nottinghamshire County Council doesn't have a good track record with children and young people's, and nobody around this table wants to get back to that. And at the moment, the only solution we're going to have is our committee, or you as the portfolio holder for finances, it might be in a year's time, just throwing money at it. We need to review it properly, and that's.
We've no intention to just throw money at it. There's a lot of work going on.
Yeah, but I don't want to be corralled into that.
There is a lot of work going on, and you'll see the results of that when we come to the next committee meeting. Councillor Waters, briefly.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Do we know when the government is going to complete the fairer funding review, and what implications do we think this is going to have on the medium-term financial strategy?
Do you know the latest on the fairer funding review, Nigel?
It's a very good question, and I know why you've asked that question. The fairer funding review, if you remember when it was announced, was all meant to be in by 2020, and here we are in 2021, and we're still talking about it. Is it going to happen? That the more times it keeps getting put off and put away, the less likely that it's going to happen at all, and I do worry about that. But whenever it was going to happen, it was always going to be beyond our medium-term financial strategy, because there's winners and losers if it was ever going to be implemented, because it's about the share of the cake, not the cake increasing in terms of the money that's going to be available in the system. And that's a difficult thing for government to get their heads round, in terms of what does that mean for the local government sector, full stop, let alone the sustainability that was one of the factors when it was going to be announced in terms of why it was going to be done. It was about sustainability. And I think we've all found through COVID that that's just proven how unstable some of the finances are for some of the councils around the country. So the simple answer to that is they'll assume there'll be another announcement as part of the local government settlement. And my anticipation would be they'll do their best to try and put that off further and further away. But thank you for asking the question.
I should say there isn't a council that's got better access to those at the top of government making these decisions than we have through our new leader. So, the pressure is being kept up on government, and we are being listened to. I'm going to move to a vote now. I don't think there's anybody else indicated to speak. Can I see everybody in favour of the recommendations? And anybody against? And there's that two abstentions. It's 2 abstentions, so that's carried. Thank you. Item 5 is risk and insurance update. I'm going to ask Claire Dyson to introduce the item. Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is the latest 6-monthly update from the risk and insurance team. This report is set out in 2 parts. The first includes a general update on the council's claims experience, and second provides an update on the other key activities of the team. For the first part, the claims experience is demonstrated in 2 appendices. Appendix 1 provides comparison of the council's claims experience for employers and public liability risks for the last 5 financial years. Key points to note from Appendix 1 are public liability claims, although initially reduced due to the lockdown. Numbers increased in the second half of last year and eventually reverted to usual levels. Employers' liability claim numbers remain below the numbers received in the previous 5 years. Appendix 2 illustrates the number of highways claims open at each quarter and the value of claims that have been successfully repudiated during the same period. It should be noted that repudiation rates for highways-related claims continue to improve, with the repudiation rate for 2021 currently resting above 90%. Moving to the second part of the report, the team has now implemented the restructure approved at committee in March this year. The new starters joined the team in September, and they are currently working through their training and induction plans. Once established, these posts will provide the additional resilience required within the team. To ensure we continue to maintain best value for our services, the team have successfully procured the broker contract. The contract was awarded to Arthur J. Gallagher's. Over the next 6 months, we will now be working in partnership with them on the forthcoming tender of the Council's insurance provision. The audit of the defence of highways liability claims has now been finalised. In the summary, the Council's current risk ratings range between very good and excellent, as shown in Appendix 3. Key recommendations from the report, including the development of highways claims manual for handlers, improved sharing of data and lessons learned between teams, and the review of the current information between claimants have been accepted. All recommendations have been implemented except the review of information for claimants. Although not yet actioned, this recommendation has been added to the team's action plan to take forward. I will pause there, Chairman, and welcome any feedback or questions in relation to the report.
Okay, thank you. It's a noting report, but I'll open it up to any questions on the report or on what you've heard. Tom?
Thank you. Whilst I welcome the fact that successful highways claims have been made reduced as outlined in Appendix B, my question surrounds the use of ViaFix. Does the council use this to actually make roads safer, or is it used as a tool to reduce successful insurance payouts? How much, Mr. Chairman, by year has the council spent on ViaFix? How many potholes have been temporarily fixed using this, and how many occasions has ViaFix been used to fix the same road defects? So I think, just to repeat, my main premise of the question was, is it used to fix roads, or is it used to stop insurance claims? As obviously we've been successful in stopping them, and the increase of ViaFix has gone up, is my premise. I did ask Nigel to get these figures before, just for the record, but
yeah, it's probably a question better aimed at the Transport and Highways Committee, isn't it? But I don't know if there's anything from an insurance point of view you'd want to say on that.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just say, obviously, the important thing really is public safety. So I think, although potholes are filled, it would be for public safety first before the consideration of insurance claims.
Yeah, and obviously there are temporary fixes as well.
So I think, Mr. Chairman, I've heard some flippant comments from the administration benches, but the reason for the question is we want value for money, and if as we've been intimated that there's a benefit to the insurance by using ViaFix, that doesn't necessarily that's a benefit to fixing the roads. And I appreciate that the committee would be to ask us as transport, but we're paying for it. Yeah. And we're paying for it out of this committee, and we're paying for it out of the transport, and we oversee all finances. So if you can't ask financial questions at the Finance Committee, Mr. Chairman, where can we?
I think it's one and the same thing, obviously, isn't it? If you're using something to fix the roads, it will reduce the amount of insurance claims. You can't reduce the amount of insurance claims if you're not fixing the roads. I think Mike indicated, and then I've got Jim.
Thanks, Chairman. If we look at quarter 3, 1920, and the amount of claims of 480 to quarter 1, 21-22, we've had 71 more claims in 21-22, and it's cost us £1 million basically. Is that the severity of claimants? Is that the insurers challenging for more cuts out of that, or what? Just £1 million for 71 extra claimants seems astronomical to me.
Okay, is there anything specific behind that?
Sorry, could I just, which appendices are you looking at? Sorry.
Appendix B.
Appendix B. So the figures there that are quoted are actually the amount of money that the council has saved in terms of repudiation of claims. So this is the number of claims that we have actually repudiated. So we've been able to decline their claim. So that's the value of money that has been saved for the council. The claim numbers is the numbers open at that particular quarter. So it hasn't cost the council that figure. That is the figure the council has saved.
Might benefit from a detailed briefing, Mike, at some point on that.
It's just a quick one. It's not not quite the same as the first question, but for insurance purposes, stroke repair services, have we got any sort of records of where the over time where the accidents have happened on a particular road? I don't think it'll be, I'm pretty sure it won't be a particular pothole, but are we keeping records of where things are particularly happening? So road A happens every couple of years, road C every 2 months, so that we can keep an eye, keeping an eye on the state of the road, basically. So are we keeping records of insurance where claims are to see if there's any sort of link?
I'm sure we are. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we are. So obviously we don't do it specific to road. However, BI may do that. But in terms of the risk and insurance team, we do monitor claims by district. We do have regular meetings with our buyer colleagues and we report back on that. So we'll let them know how many claims we've received per district, the cost of any claims that we've had to settle, and obviously the repudiation rate as well, how many we've been able to decline.
Thank you for that. This is a regular report which will come back to us again in 6 months. So perhaps a little bit of those details we could incorporate in the report in next time it comes to us. I can't see anybody else having indicated it was just a noting report. So can we note that? Thank you. So item 6 is the ICT operational performance for Q1. I'll move the recommendations on page 35.
For Mr. Second Chairman.
And I'll ask Paul to add anything to the agenda.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. There's a couple of indicators that we haven't met. One's to do with extended call times. That's because a lot of people are working at home, and as a result, those calls are taking slightly longer to resolve.
Yeah.
So can you move the microphone closer?
So, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's
Thank
better.
you.
Thank you.
So, a couple of those indicators in Appendix A we haven't achieved. One of those relates to call times, and that's because people are working at home and we're having to work through some of their home setup. That takes a bit longer, and the financial indicator is suggesting that we are not on target. That's because of spiky spend, so we get licenses that hit us in year. At the moment, we are on target in terms of our overall forecast. The main issue I want to draw your attention to is the area of technical debt, which I've summarised in Appendix B. The Council, because of COVID, has put a lot of effort into standing up services to support people working from home, and this has had a consequential impact on our ability to update some of the systems that we've got and the underlying infrastructure. We are building in work programme into the strategy to ensure that we manage that over time, but it is something that's going to impact us in the sort of medium term as we get to grips with some of the stuff that we haven't updated over the last 12 months due to the COVID impact. I'll take questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm conscious whenever we talk about IT at committees, it descends into a debate about members' IT, and we are the tip of an iceberg. We're 66 users out of several thousand. Any questions on the report? Jim?
Well, it's not directly in the report, and pardon me, it may have been dealt with before, actually, but as we're updating and we're actually replacing, do we have a policy of where the actual replacements go? Do they go to the company or do they go to charities? I'm making the assumption that they're completely wiped, obviously, but do we actually have a policy of where the X equipment goes, or does it just go back to the company?
Yeah, Paul.
So we have a contract in place with an organisation that takes that equipment away. It does remove any data. It does a clever sweep of the disks, etc., to make sure everything's removed. And if they can be reused, they are. But if they can't, they are then destroyed. There's no real way around that. If the machine's no longer fit for purpose, then we can't use it, basically.
Okay, Jimmy.
Yeah, just wondering who uses it. I mean, is it going to a charity or it's being resold? Just
yeah,
general.
sure. Do we know that, Paul?
I don't, off the top of my head, I
Okay.
don't, but I can find out.
We can have something the next time we get an ICT report, perhaps add that to the report to the committee. Andre?
As people return back to the office from home, hopefully, will that make a big saving on the ICT services?
So we've installed the infrastructure to support people to take part in hybrid working. you're not going to see a significant shift in cost profile by people coming back into the office because they will be using the technology. The sort of main advantage that we gained, and I know it's looking at the sunny side from COVID, as it were, was the fact that we were able to deploy this type of technology extremely quickly. It would have normally taken a lot longer in terms of cultural shift. Now that technology is being used, it underpins some of the activity that we'll be carrying out in terms of the estate strategy. So it's not something where you think you'd want to remove that technology now. We would want to continue working with it. So I don't think it's going to reduce the cost significantly. What it will do is change the profile of expenditure, because as we move to software as a service, that sort of spiky capital spend you get gets flattened out, and you get a sort of revenue increase as a result. So that's the thing that we'll have to watch out for.
Yeah, thank you. I think our job really is to drive out the savings that come from increased remote working, and that's what we'll see when the review of the Investing in Nottinghamshire programme comes forwards. Any further questions, Mike?
Yeah, only because a colleague mentioned it, the provision of what put forward and hybrid working. And I know Adrian Smith was leading on the provision from here with regards members' facilities. Is there any movement on that? Are we updated on that at all?
So is that relating to the council chambers, etc.?
It was in the members' room when Adrian came out with, I can't think of the other chap's name now, to design something. So as
there are
members
a
could
number
work
of
from home and be in here.
There are a number of rooms that have been set up for hybrid meetings around the building. Sure, if you've not been in any of them, we can arrange to show you that and the kit that's in there. It's very good actually, and it works far better than everyone trying to do it from their individual machines. But how many of those have we got in place now?
So we've only got a pilot running at the moment. We've got four hybrid working rooms with cameras. We're looking at the council chambers and other offices as a separate piece of work. That's not included in the activity related to hybrid working. But we will be, once that proof of concept has proven resilient, because at certain times at the moment it resets and we have to get someone out to fix it. And we're working through that literally this week. Once we've actually got a completely fully working prototype, we'll roll them out across all the offices in the county, all medium and large meeting rooms.
It's a good system, and if you want to go and see one, I'm sure we can arrange that. We've had several meetings in them, and yeah. Okay. Right. Okay, if there are no further questions, it's been proposed. That's everybody in favour of the recommendations? Thank you. And that was unanimous, so that's carried. Item 7 then is the digital declaration, and presentation again from you, Paul.
This is where I struggle with the technology. Hang on 1 minute. I thought that as well. Thank you, Chair. This is about the local digital declaration. It's suggesting that we haven't signed this, but we have actually signed up to the local digital declaration. I'll trot through what that means to us. So what it's trying to do is design services around the end user, so our citizens. And effectively, it's trying to ensure that we design that with mobile devices in mind, but also not excluding other people in the community who may not be not just as au fait with those devices, but not able to use those devices in the same way. So it's trying to design those services such that you get a single point of contact all the activity happens within the organisation and across organisational boundaries, and then the citizen either gets an outcome, an intervention, or the information they require. So that demands a few things from the authority. It demands that we sort of break through the traditional organisational technological silos, which I think we are already doing. We need to fix our plumbing. So that's about how we interact internally between systems, but also across organisational boundaries. So, for instance, a good example of that would be the brokerage that we've just put in. We were interoperating with the NHS. We've got to use data ethically, safe and secure. And we need to demonstrate digital leadership. So that's about us blogging and making people aware of what we're doing in this space. And it talks about embedding an open culture. So this is about trying to demonstrate not only the way we're working, but there's a thing used in the digital library, if you like, terms or dictionary, which is about fail fast. So we try things on a small scale, and we might try things that are unique, innovative, etc. But we don't try it at big scale. We do that at small scale. If it doesn't work, we move on. But that requires a degree of transparency and a degree of support, etc. So that's what this declaration is trying to achieve. The benefits are that we get free digital skills training and we get access to funding from the department that's just changed its name. I've got MHCLG, but that's changed its name now. What do we need to commit to? Well, we need to commit to being able to blog, etc., being open. I think I've covered some of that already, but we champion that. So this is a cultural change. It's not just about doing things in the old traditional way in the sort of departmental and organisational construct. It's about changing the way we think about our citizens and how we interact with them and designing the services around them. And we are visible and we promote that. So there's things called service standards. There's also the technology code of practice. There are various artifacts that exist from within government that we can call on and use in order to support us in this way of working. And it's also about trying to ensure that we do that and we are able to reuse those components that we develop ourselves. I've got a slide on there what this really means, but I think you can probably look at that in your leisure because there's no way I can read that. And the next steps, I suppose that's what you would be interested in, and that's establish a small task and finish group to report to the Corporate Digital Board to ensure we can meet and buy into those declaration commitments. We've got residents' access. We're talking about using that as the project that we would promote in terms of digital declaration. And then the main key area here is to work with HR colleagues such that we not only sign up to that declaration, but we ensure that we've got the appropriate things in place to ensure our workforce is ready to undertake that activity. I'll pause at that moment, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Any questions, any comments on the report? Jim?
Just a general question on the free digital skills training. Is that for the IT staff or the staff in general, or even for councillors? I mean, is it restricted to just IT staff?
It isn't restricted. It's for all people within the council. It's available for all people within the council. It is focusing on developing digital products. So it's about systems and processes, but it's not exclusive to IT people. It is for the whole council.
Okay, thank you. I think what we would want to see is an improvement in the proportion of people who go online, whether it's on the app or the website, to do something and succeed in doing it. So how are we going to measure that? And when you come back in 6 months or 12 months' time, how will you be able to point to that having improved as people improve this?
That's a very good point, because one of the things I'm going to have to do is undertake a sort of benchmarking exercise, and we have Gartner on board. So I'm going to use them to measure our sort of digital maturity, if you like. And then in 12 months' time, we can measure our digital maturity at that point, because there isn't a hard and fast measure. It's much more about your culture. So that requires a bit more of searching type questions rather than something which is just saying X people use Teams, let's say. It's not like that. It's a softer indicator.
Okay, thank you. Andre.
Yeah, I welcome the report. I think it's good what you're doing, but I'm also concerned about a lot of people. There's a big rush to digitise everything. They get everybody online and let's blog and tweet. And I've just been away with a load of my friends or mature age, and we have to log on and log off, and it's very difficult for a lot of people to do that. And I'm a little bit worried that we rush into this, and you're going to exclude a lot of people out of this when they get in touch. We don't want to lose the traditional ways of keeping in contact. A blog, you might be surrounded by people who read blogs, and you might think that everybody reads blogs like everybody goes on Twitter, which they don't really, do they? So you just want to be careful that we don't rush and exclude a lot of people. I'm not being old-fashioned. I'm just trying to say most of the money we spend is on vulnerable people and older people, and they're the people that don't have access to IT equipment and things like that. So just be careful. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
I can come. So there's a thing called the service standards, which GDS, Government Digital Service, have created, which we would look to adopt. It's within the Digital Declaration, and there's quite a lot of emphasis on accessibility there, and it's thinking about that very issue, because they recognise that not everyone's going to get to grips with some of the technology, and as a result, we need to make sure that we take the appropriate steps to ensure that we're not excluding sections of society.
Yeah, good. Okay, reassured by that, Andre. Tom?
Yeah, I think just to pick up on Councillor Camilleri's point, so while I agree with the principle, I think a lot of this is to do with the back office things. And I think to look at I think it's really great what we do. I mean, obviously we met before the meeting, and I think it's really fantastic. But we always seem to be looking at it behind the curve. And to use a couple of examples for Councillor Camilleri and others, like for example, when we took over the council at Ashfield Council, I run the housing portfolio. All of our housing, all the vans are based in Sutton. We cover Hucknall as well. It takes 25 minutes to drive each way through Hucknall and back. All the guys used to have to check in all the tools at the end of the day. Now all they do is they take a picture on the smartphone to show they're all there, and they can take the van home with them. And they can do an extra 2 jobs a day. So a lot of it's the back office stuff. And like when Mrs. Smith, who's 90-year-old, phones in the county council reception to report the pothole, because she doesn't want to use the app, exactly as you say, the old-fashioned methods, that receptionist then can just put it in a system and it automatically goes onto the system rather than having. So it's a lot of the back office stuff which I support. But I suppose for the committee, and that particularly the IT, things are moving fast. And to use the care sector as an example, I won't use the company's name, but there's a company based in Ashfield in Mansfield that are revolutionising the way that adult social care is done. So at the moment, obviously people are entitled to self-commission adult social care, or the county council pays for it, or they pay for it themselves. But this particular company sends notifications on people's phone when the carer arrives. Every time the carer does something, they're not filling out a chart, they put it straight in the phone. They get automatic notifications to the family and relatives that, I've just changed the bedpan, whatever it might be. And then they get a notification when they leave. Some of this stuff, in my opinion, and maybe something we could put pressure on as a committee, is to make sure that all companies have those standards, exactly as we demand them internally, and as a sector, as local government, we should be demanding it of our third parties as well. And we're working with more social partners like the NHS already. I think those kind of things could go cross-sector, because ultimately we have a money-saving objective, i.e. that the better the technology is, the more streamlined we can be with customer service. But then also we have a usability. We want it to be as easy as possible without, as Councillor Camilleri says, without shutting out the older demographic that do prefer things to be done the same way. So it's all ebbs and flows. But overall, it's great, the report. My only probably concern would be that I hope we're not chasing today's agenda. We need to be chasing tomorrow's agenda. And have we got the expertise and resource to be doing that? Thank you.
Yeah, we've had that IT system in adults for 2 or 3 years, 3 or 4 years probably, and it brought about an incredible 28%, I think, was it improved productivity in those teams.
That in 2018. This
Absolutely.
council developed in 2018 and had what is just described as council actually.
Yeah.
It was our innovation from the county council that expanded out to NHS ambulance.
Yeah. Okay. Any John?
Just a quick one there, tongue in cheek, Chairman. Is there any way we can deal with the keyboard warriors who seem to be constantly sat there going like that? You know, I had one the other night. It was about 3 times through the night and then about 6 times through the day. I'm in a fortunate position being a leader at Gedling. I do have a PA who can pick some of this stuff off. But if they start loading things on our staff, it's a considerable cost at the end of the day. So when you're doing your magic boxes and all the rest of it, put something in there to deal with these in a sensible and manageable way. But some are very frustrating because as lay people, which we are, as council, I'm with Andre on this, you know, we don't forget the other ways of contacting people. You know, I think it's very important. But we have an army of people now out there who constantly take up massive time of very important people like, you know, chairs of these committees, etc. Thank you.
No, it's a good point, John. I don't know what the answer is to it, but yeah, Andre.
Right, it's not that. It's like the doctors. You go see your doctor and you see him face to face, and he checks you over and has a look at your eyes and does things. But now they've got used to doing it digitally over on the line, and they don't want to go back to the old way. And that's okay for some people, but there's a lot of people who need to do that, and we've just got to be careful that we don't go down that road. Because if you just leave a few people out of the system, there's them that we're going to have to that get depressed, get low, get sick, get ill, everything. Technology is brilliant, it really is, but we've got to be careful with that, and we've got to look after his privacy as well. All these things whizzing around. Yeah. Thank you.
I completely agree with you. In some ways, it is for Paul and his ICT team to make sure the ICT is as good as it can be and works as well as it does, and it's for us to make sure that we don't leave people behind, and that there is always a different way of contacting if people want to do it face to face or on a telephone or by any other means. Jim?
Yeah, it's just on that particular one. I mean, the technology does actually, particularly in doctor surgery, does pay its place. It's actually part of like a triage. It's a tool. But as I understand it, the doctors themselves would prefer to go back face to face, but they're still waiting for the government directive to allow them to do so. So you can blame the technology, but it's not the technology in this case. But even when they're allowed to, it's still a useful tool as part of a triage. But it shouldn't be relied on. It should be the whole panoply of actually what's needed. And there'll always be a face-to-face required at some time.
No, quite right. Mike?
Yeah, quick one. What's our responsibility if there's a failure? You know, we've just had Zuckerberg with 6 hours, cost him 6 billion at the end of the day. Simple question, sorry. So if there's a fracture in supply so that we can't deliver anything through the systems that are in place?
Okay, so we have resilient systems built in. So we have a failover to an organisation called Node 4, which is, I think, something like 17 miles away from where we are now. So if we have a failure here, that's where we would fail back to, rather than a fracture in systems. We're coming on to the cybersecurity report, which I think is a closed item, but that is how we ensure that we don't get attacks. What happened with Mark Zuckerberg was an incorrect upgrade. It was effectively a wrong line of code, which took the service out, and it took them a while to find it. We do have those outages, but they are within service levels, and we've got a triage method by which we can fix them. I don't have a specific costing to hand or how much that costs us. It's more to do with service degradation than it is to do with specific cost profile.
Yeah, thank you. I've never been aware of our website going down, he says, touch wood, but I'm going to regret that, aren't I? Okay, I don't think there's anybody else that's indicated, so can I see everybody in favour of the recommendation? Thank you, so that's carried. And on to item 8, which is the cyber security assurance for Q1. That's you again.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is coming to you after we went through the Cyber Essentials. The Cyber Essentials standard strengthened significantly at the beginning of this year, and as a result, we didn't get through that. We had been clear previously. We were requested to put an action plan in place, which we have done. That action plan is quite tight. Again, it's been impacted by some of the activities relating to COVID, but we believe we can still achieve the resubmission, which is planned for the autumn. The other aspects, the reason that it's turned to sort of amber is because some of the devices that attach to our network aren't attaching to our network. So things like laptops, people aren't switching them on, and therefore we can't discover them. What we've put in place are methods by which, if you don't connect within a pre-specified amount of time, then we basically chop the workstation off from connecting to the network, and that's how we're resolving some of these issues. Should be noted that we've got lots of endpoint security in place, so we've got virus checking software and software that prevents certain types of attacks. And where we've got servers that aren't fully up to date, we've hidden them in effectively behind a firewall so that people cannot actually attack them. I shall pause there.
Yeah, thank you. So most of this report is in the exempt item later on, and I think that was necessary because obviously we are good performers actually, but we didn't want to give any technical details for obvious reasons. So just bear that in mind. Any comments on this part of the report, Jim?
Yeah, I don't think it affects on that part. It's just more of a general question scale. Now that Windows 11 is coming into place, will there be a significant increase in the need of our security updates at this time? Or will it be covered? I mean, will there be a sudden rush that we need to actually be more secure? Will it outdate service? Because every update on Windows tends to outdate extra stuff.
Yeah.
Old stuff.
Yes. So when I was talking about technical debt, this is one of those areas of technical debt where you move from one operating system version to another. We will have to upgrade a number of servers. They tend to run operating systems, this is Microsoft, for about 10 years after the last update, major update. So where we've got Microsoft 2016, that goes out of support in 2026. Now, you might think, well, 2026 is years away, but if you've got a key critical business operating system that runs on it and you can't move any further than that, then we need to look at the entire stack. So it will have an impact.
Okay, thank you. There'll probably be some more questions when we get into the exempt part of the item. I'll just move the recommendation on this one.
On the second, Chairman.
And if I can see, it's a note in report, and we'll bring this back for the next quarter. Is everybody in favour of that? Okay, anybody against? Any abstentions? Okay, so thanks for that, Paul. I'll move on to the work programme, which the two items we've already talked about, which are on the next committee agenda. Anybody, anything they'd like to see added to a future committee? No? Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, I think the children and young people will be part of the budget monitoring report, which is on every agenda. And as and when we need a separate report on anything in children and young people, we will bring it back to committee as we have done several times in the past.
Well, I think, Chair, just so it's on record of what I'm asking for, is I think we should have a specialist look, meeting by meeting, into the children and young people's budget for the sole reason that it's not niche anymore. It's got out of hand, the budget's dropped, and the funding's gone, and we need to plug that gap. And instantly, I mean, the report, the information's in the current report we have in these papers, an extra £2 million. At the next, when we review it, medium term again, it'll be another 2 million, another 2 million. It's going to get completely out of hand. And we've got the issues of the Southall Minster House. We need to start looking into it, especially. So my request would be, just so it's on the record, is that we ask children and young people to come to every meeting of the finance so we can keep them on track.
Okay, look, I hear you. We've got it on the next agenda. We'll take that item at next month's meeting. It will certainly make part of the budget monitoring report every month or every committee. And as and when necessary, we'll bring it back as a full report to committee But let's leave that discussion for that item on the next agenda. With that, is everybody happy with the work programme? Okay, thank you. So I'll move the exclusion of public and press and ask for the live stream to be switched off. Just give it a minute.